The room was silent, yet the silence was heavy with judgment. A boy no older than 12 sat trembling at a desk in the grand hall of the school, a hall where portraits of scholars and achievers from decades past seemed to watch with stern eyes. His hand gripped a pen so tightly that his knuckles turned pale, and his forehead glistened with beads of sweat. Across the room, rows of classmates sat stiffly, whispering among themselves, their whispers stinging sharper than any words spoken aloud. At the front, with a smirk curled on her lips, stood the teacher, respected by some, feared by most. Her voice carried through the hall like a cruel echo, "If you pass this test, I'll tear my diploma in half." The students gasped, their eyes widening, but the woman only laughed louder, convinced of her own superiority. What no one knew was that this test, this cruel moment, would reveal a truth greater than any diploma on the wall could ever hold. Before we dive into this powerful story, if you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the ability of people to rise against all odds, please pause for a moment to like, share, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. And don't forget to leave a comment. We love hearing your thoughts. Your support helps us spread stories that matter, stories that touch hearts and remind the world of compassion. The boy's name was Daniel, and to many, he was just another struggling student in the back of the classroom. His shirts were always a little worn, his shoes scuffed, his bag stitched together from old fabric. Life had not been kind to him. His father had left when he was just a child, and his mother, who worked long hours as a seamstress, often returned home late into the night with calloused hands and weary eyes. Daniel's grades were never the highest, and teachers rarely had patience for him. He was shy, often misunderstood, and carrying burdens no child should bear. Yet inside him was a fire no one else could see, a quiet genius hidden beneath layers of doubt and ridicule. The teacher, Mrs. Lawrence, had made it her mission to single Daniel out. Perhaps it was because his presence reminded her of weakness, or perhaps it was because she never took the time to see beyond the surface. To her, Daniel was an example of failure in a world where only achievement seemed to matter. Day after day, she would throw sarcastic remarks his way, and day after day, Daniel would lower his gaze, swallowing his pain like bitter medicine. But this day was different. This test wasn't just about equations and words. For Daniel, it was about dignity. It was about standing against a world that told him he wasn't good enough. As the sun streamed through the tall windows of the hall, casting golden beams across the polished wooden floor, Daniel began to write. His hand moved slowly at first, hesitant, almost as if he didn't trust himself. But then, something shifted. The pen flowed across the paper, his mind opening up like a river breaking its dam. Every question that seemed impossible to others began to reveal its answers to him. His heart pounded, not with fear, but with a rhythm of determination. Around him, classmates whispered and chuckled, waiting for him to stumble, but their voices grew distant, muffled beneath the roar of his focus. Mrs. Lawrence leaned against her desk, arms folded, smirking still. She had seen many students crumble, and she believed Daniel would be no different. But as she watched his eyes sharpen and his pen dance across the page, her laughter began to fade. Something about his focus unsettled her. He was no longer the boy she had mocked, he was becoming something else, something undeniable. Minutes passed into an hour, and when the final bell rang, Daniel placed his pen down with trembling hands. His paper was filled, every blank space conquered, every problem faced head-on. The hall fell silent again as Mrs. Lawrence collected his work. She scanned the answers quickly, expecting mistakes. But as her eyes darted from line to line, her smirk faltered. She read once more, slower this time. Then again. Each answer was not only correct but written with clarity, precision, and insight far beyond his age. A hush spread across the room as Mrs. Lawrence's face turned pale. The students leaned forward, sensing something extraordinary had happened. And then, in the quiet of that golden afternoon, Daniel raised his head, meeting her eyes with a steady gaze he had never dared before. He did not need to speak, his work had already shouted louder than any voice. The promise she had made, mockingly, cruelly, now hung in the air like a noose tightening around her pride. She had said she would tear her diploma if Daniel passed. And he had not just passed, he had excelled. For the first time, Mrs. Lawrence felt the sting of humility. The diploma that had once been her shield now seemed like fragile paper compared to the brilliance of the boy she had doubted. What happened next was something no one in that room would ever forget. Mrs. Lawrence, her hands shaking, lifted her diploma from the wall where it hung in a polished frame. She stared at it for what felt like an eternity, her pride battling her conscience. And then, in front of her students, she tore it in half. The sound of paper ripping echoed louder than thunder in that silent hall. Some students gasped, others sat in awe, and Daniel simply closed his eyes, a single tear sliding down his cheek, not of sadness, but of victory. From that day onward, Daniel was never the same. He walked taller, not because he needed recognition, but because he had proven to himself that he was worthy, that his struggles did not define his limits. His mother, when she heard the story later that evening, embraced him with tears streaming down her face. The world might have underestimated him, but he had carved his place through determination, courage, and quiet brilliance. And as for Mrs. Lawrence, the event humbled her. For the first time in her career, she realized that teaching was not about mocking weaknesses but nurturing strengths. She began to see Daniel differently, and in doing so, she began to change herself. So, dear friends, if this story touched your heart, if you believe that no child should be mocked for their struggles and that every hidden genius deserves a chance to shine, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. And leave us a comment. We truly want to hear your thoughts on Daniel's journey. Did it move you? Did it remind you of someone you know who fought against the odds? Special request, before you leave, please comment below with the words, "Never give up," to remind the world that kindness and perseverance always win. And so, in the warmth of that golden afternoon, in a school hall filled with whispers that turned into respect, one boy proved that genius isn't always loud, it often hides in the quiet determination of those who refuse to surrender.